Welcome, everyone. My name's Kat Evans. I'm your host and moderator for today. Our usual webinar queen, Annabelle Monson, was not able to host today, so I am filling in. My first time hosting a webinar, very exciting. Thanks for joining us for a preview to the fast approaching aviation emissions reporting season and a look at sustainability initiatives. Today, we're sharing a broader update applicable to everyone that's tackling the requirements of aviation's emission schemes, sustainability, and voluntary carbon offset initiatives in their own operations. Our experts on board today, the dynamic duo themselves, Adam Hartley and Juan Muniz. Welcome, guys. Very exciting. So Adam will be covering our agenda today. So Adam, I'm going to set the stage with you. Can you kick off the agenda and provide an overview of who's impacted and a look into the upcoming compliance calendar and deadlines?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for that introduction, Kat. I really appreciate you being here with us today, Juan. I'm glad to have you with me as always, brother.
Always a
Uh,
pleasure.
there's a few things in life that are as regular as ETS reporting in Juan and I's lives, but here we are again in 2024. The first time Juan and I got involved in EU ETS was 2009. We both had a lot more hair and quite a bit younger, but some things have changed. There's always new changes to these programs, and we want to try to lay this out in as easy and understandable way as possible. And then, of course, we will leave plenty of room for questions and then contact information to get to us directly as needed. So with that, let's launch into this a little bit. So here's our quick agenda for today. Thanks for joining again. We're going to be highlighting key deadlines, upcoming action items like data validation for 2024 flight activity and reporting, registry account management, and overall ETS reporting steps. We'll take a step-by-step look at required reporting and carbon offset obligations, followed by an overview of the always new ETS monitoring requirements that include things like non-CO2 gases and the associated NEATS calculation tools. We'll also explore voluntary carbon offsets and options. So whether that's meeting ESG goals, flight department goals, event-specific goals like World Economic Forum. So we'll delve into that a little bit. And then, of course, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So feel free to drop any kind of questions you have along the way, like Kat said. Juan, let's start with the basics, though, and talk about applicable operators' flights and exemption thresholds.
Yeah, so let's start with the original EU ETS. Started like you just mentioned back in 2009. So yikes, we've been doing this for 15 years. So it really puts into perspective how things in the regulatory environment, especially with emissions, has evolved, right? So let's look at EU ETS first and see what is the applicability here. So for EU ETS, all flights departing from or arriving to the European Economic Area, which includes all EU member states, plus Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. The compliance obligations for EU ETS are only intra-EEA flights, meaning that flights only within that European Economic Area. It's both flights that depart and arrive within the EEA are subject to offset. So again, full scope includes flights to from within, but the offset only includes the intra-EEA flights. We had Brexit back a few years ago. So what happens? The UK has to develop their own monitoring program, emissions program, etc. So for UK ETS, for full scope, we're talking about flights departing from or arriving in the UK plus its territories, as well as all EEA member states and Switzerland. The compliance obligations, compliance meaning offsets, are flights that depart and arrive within the UK, as well as the flights that operate between the UK and the EEA. All right, so take a look at that chart that we have on the screen here, and that kind of gives you a breakdown of what flights are applicable. So EU ETS, UK ETS in full rigor right now. Let's talk about the future, CORSIA. For this program developed by ICAO, it's an international program. So it's not just Europe area, UK area. This encompasses all international travel. Full scope for CORSIA targets international flights, all international flights. This means if your aircraft departs from one country, arrives into another country, that is considered for CORSIA numbers. The compliance obligations are a little different than UK ETS and EU ETS in the sense that this goes to 1,000 tons of CO2 for both private and charter operators. For EU ETS, UK ETS, it's 1,000 tons for private operators, 10,000 for commercial and charter operators. So the key takeaway here is EU ETS, UK ETS, CORSIA are three separate programs with distinct scopes and compliance requirements. CORSIA, as far as CORSIA is concerned for US operators, we are in a voluntary phase of the program currently until 2027 when that becomes mandatory. And right now, we are saying it's mandatory in 2027. With new administration coming into the US, we kind of need to wait and see where we're going to fall as far as the compliance is concerned with CORSIA in the next couple of years. But again, as always, we will keep you all informed of that progression. So who is applicable? Applicable operators here. Now, we monitor the applicable activity of operators against the reporting and exemption thresholds. As I just mentioned, based on full scope for EU ETS, UK ETS, it's 1,000 tons for private operators and 10,000 tons for commercial operators. Anyone who reports over that threshold, you are required to offset your carbon output. And remember, when you're offsetting, you're only offsetting those intra EEA flights. And those need to be submitted by the deadlines, which we'll discuss here in shortly. Back to you, Adam, with the data validation.
So let's talk data validation, right? So Universal combines both universal flight data that we have in our UVGo system, along with flight logs from operators to identify, the amount of activity that people have in general. And then our primary record, our primary data set is using the Eurocontrol's ETS support facility. So we kind of combine all three of those data sets, work with operators to make sure we get to a refined specific fleet, specific operations and legs that were traveled during that reporting year. So it's about pulling together a couple of different data sources to make sure we have the right picture and then massaging that ETS support facility data to something that we can officially report. If you want to include SAF, or if you are, I guess I would say this in a different way. If you're an operator who utilizes SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, when traveling in Europe or the UK at any sort of volume, right? If you do a couple of uplifts a year, it's not really what we're looking for. But if you're an operator who's committed to using sustainable aviation fuel and uplifts on a regular basis and want that information included into your report for 2024 or beyond, then what we need is a sustainability statement from the uplift itself that goes with each of those legs. So we're not going to be tracking actual fuel per se, but we would take the estimated fuel that's from the Eurocontrol ETS support facility and combine that data with the sustainable, the SAF usage data to pair them up in your report. The ultimate outcome of that is that if you are utilizing sustainable aviation on your fuel, you can avoid a double charge. By submitting that information, you would actually be required to submit less carbon credits to UK ETS or EU ETS. There are a lot of different requirements and a lot of different constraints around how much you can claim, where you can claim it, and things like that. So like I said, unless you're uplifting at volume, it's probably not that critical for you. But if you're putting data sets together for us right now, or providing Universal with data or data validation, and SAF is being used by your operation, please bring it up so that we can discuss and see if there's value in pursuing a SAF offset. It's more steps, requires third-party verification, and those types of things. But right now, when we're in the data collection phase, this would be the time to send us all of those sustainability statements and tell us that's what you want us to do for 2024, or tell us you're really considering it for 2025 and beyond. So Juan, tell us a little bit more about data validation and how that actually takes place.
Sure. So, as Adam mentioned, we want to make sure that we have your most accurate aircraft details to ensure that the correct flights are allocated to your operation. So, what we do is make sure that the fleet list forms are updated with the ETS support facility to ensure that we have the most updated information when we receive that Eurocontrol report. So what we do, we've already started kicking off the data validation process for the 2024 reporting. If you haven't received an email from us with the data validation request, two things to take into account here. We will get to you. I promise you, you will. We just received updated reports literally this morning. So we will be sending out more data validation emails for you to ensure that the data that we've been supplied is correct. If you haven't received the email, again, we will be sending it to you. Or second, you may be so low on the emissions output for the year that we may just send you a certificate of compliance and let you know what your numbers are. That way you are aware that the data validation that we have received is accurate. So we send each client the data validation email that includes the flight records and specific steps for your specific operation. On the next slide, as far as communication with member states, there are new portals and processes on the ETS regulatory landscape each year. We have UK METS for the UK, obviously. We have Eden for Ireland. Germany, Italy have secure portals, with Germany also with an FMS. Spain has a brand new portal with AOHA that needs to be complied with, and that is the mechanism to submit reports. So as time has gone by, a lot of these countries have developed their own reporting platforms. And then some are still in the legacy programs of submitting the reports via email. So we have to be in constant communication with these member states to know what process to take in order to submit all your reports. Now, we do expect these trends to continue with more countries coming on board with different types of portal. As far as deadlines are concerned, the key deadlines for the reporting to be aware of. Now, we have 8 annual emissions reports due in the UK and most member states by March 31st of 2025. This has been the standard pretty much since EU ETS began back in 2009. Reporting deadlines for most member states, as well as the UK, March 31st of this year. The offset is required by April 30th for the UK and September 30th for all EU ETS member states. But we will push to resolve both in April-May timeframe. We will definitely get the reports submitted before the March 31st deadlines. And the other deadlines, for instance, Spain is February 28th, Portugal, March 15th. And then all the other member states is March 31st. But we will solve the reporting and the offsetting in April, May of this year. So Adam, what comes next after the official reporting?
Yeah, glad you asked, Juan. And, just to piggyback what you just said before I move forward. Yeah, the reason we want to close things out in April or May is so that we can can kind of put a book or close the book on 2024 because there are a lot of new requirements coming in for 2025, and it will get messy or confusing if we try to, keep 2024 open for an extended period of time while we're trying to manage all of these new requirements for you guys in 2025. So that's what we need to do. But if there's a budget issue or if there's some good reason that we want to resolve your carbon credits later in the year, talk to me about it. Let me know what's driving that, and we can hopefully give you good guidance. So what comes after official reporting? So aircraft operator holding accounts. Aircraft operator holding accounts, otherwise called registry accounts for ETS programs. They are commodities accounts that actually manage the financial instrument that is a carbon credit. So every carbon credit has a serial number and a financial value based on when it was purchased from the market. But no matter what the cost of it is, one carbon credit always equals 1 ton of CO2. So we have to open up an aircraft operator holding account, and because they manage financial commodities, there's a whole lot of KYC checks, know your customer checks, that are in line with banking regulations in the EU. So we do a lot of validation and verification with documents for the legal entity, as well as Juan and I provide documentation about ourselves to become authorized representatives and secure persons within that financial system in Europe. So there's significant documentation and requirements to open and maintain those accounts. If it's your first time reporting or you haven't reported in a long time, you may have to open one, and you need a separate account for each program. So UK ETS has its own standalone registry account. EU ETS has its own standalone registry account. CORSIA will have its own mechanism when the time comes. But these are all different accounts that must be set up and then maintained. So throughout the year, you may get those validation notices from us or our partner, AES, Aviation Emission Solutions, who also helps us manage some registry accounts to keep that documentation and those KYC checks and the personnel who are on those accounts up to date. If we're not managing your account for you, please reach out, and you're currently managing it yourself. Please reach out and let us know if there's any way that we can help support that or any challenges you may be having with registry accounts. All right, so when we send out this data, and this is really what so many people are after, is trying to understand the data that they're getting in front of them so that they can communicate it appropriately within their organization and all the different people and different reasons who might want to know what's going on. So when we look at full scope, what Juan mentioned, that helps us identify all activity to, from, and within the zone, right? To, from, and within the applicable area. That defines how big of an operator you are and whether or not you are exempt. So that it defines whether or not you have to report, and then whether you're available to have the small emitter tools at your for you to use, which allows us to do estimates and ease the process versus having to do actual fuel uplifts and third-party verification. So these reports from the Eurocontrol help us in so many different ways. And by us, I mean Universal, as well as aircraft operators who participate in the program. But your full scope for each program has its own row, and full scope is all the way to the right. So for this particular program, we're talking about 701 full scope for the EU, and 978 tons for the full scope for the UK. So for this particular example, they would both be exempt from the reporting for that year, since those are under 1,000 as a private operator. Should you go over 1,000, the numbers in the first two columns on the left are your actual reporting requirements. So when Juan talks about intra or reporting requirements or offsetting requirements, kind of all these interchangeable terms, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the flights, the number of flights that were intra, and how many tons of CO2 were resulting from those specific flights. Which is also it's really limiting to this program overall, that's how this functions. We do a whole lot of paperwork. You guys do a whole lot of flying that's captured in that full scope. There's all sorts of compliance steps. And then at the end of the day, you're buying, single or double digit carbon credits, which before aviation was pulled into the scheme, didn't even exist. You couldn't buy less, carbon credits in less than 1,000, really less than 10,000 when this first started and they started talking about carbon credits. And I started calling people and saying, I have an operator who needs 5. They just laughed at me. Like that's the most stupid thing I've ever heard. They're like, I could only sell you 10,000. So this program continues to mold to try to fit us, or maybe not fit us, but is certainly designed to pull in aviation activity even at these very small levels. So how much is this going to cost me? What does a carbon credit cost? Here's just a quick snapshot of current pricing. You can see that as we get to a reporting season, you start to see some of these prices climb on the EU side. It's actually, and the UK side too, has just recently spiked, but you're looking at €80 or so for a EU carbon credit, and 42 British pounds right now for a UK carbon credit. So beyond all of your administration charges and things like that, then you actually have to buy the carbon credits themselves, and that's what we surrender to the member states. So once you've submitted your mandatory carbon credits, which are the EUAs or UKAs, these are standard credits that the EU just develops in big giant bushels. They're not necessarily connected to individual projects per se. There are individual projects that provide carbon credits into that bucket, but not in the way that you think of when you think about voluntary carbon emissions. So in this little pie chart here, and this was actually from our activity, I think in 2020, but it holds true. The kind of percentages and relationship holds true today. The blue part is the total footprint, so kind of the full scope of all of the universal subscribers. And then the red little wedge there is the actual carbon offsets that they were required to buy. So you're down in like a 2%, 3% area, something like that. And that's really kind of indicative of what a corporate flight department, generally offsets, because you guys are doing what's required, and I totally understand that. But if you wanted to work on the rest of that pie, there's certainly opportunities to do that in the voluntary carbon offset market, and voluntary carbon offsets don't cost €80 and 40 pounds. So once you're through that process, if your company has ESG goals, if they have, if you want to protect yourself from plane shame, those types of things, voluntary carbon offsets are out there and available for you. We source them through a nonprofit 501c3, but they actually manage specific projects around the globe so that you and your organization can find something that actually speaks to you guys, speaks to your mission, and like I said, helps you fill out that pie. If you're chasing net zero or any of those other types of terms that they get thrown around, bring those our way, and we can help you talk through it and give you access to something that's secure and that you can feel confident about with these projects. Because I think the biggest concern we hear, Juan, when it comes to voluntary, I picture like somebody walking into an old west town. You walk into your voluntary carbon offset project, and then it all like falls over and it's just cardboard in the wind, right? So these are actually validated projects. These are projects where people have gone out and made site visits, and there's a lot of regulatory compliance and certification around this style of project that we engage with. So that kind of takes us all the way through our cycle there, and then kind of what does it spill out into, Juan?
So yeah, what we'll do after we complete the 2024 ETS reporting process, and again, that should be by the April May timeframe. We'll provide everyone a compliance summary outlining the reporting exemption and voluntary offset information. So all this information that Adam has covered for the voluntary offsets will be shared with you to encourage operators to make up for that carbon footprint that is not reported and offset on. For clients that require, we'll provide an per aircraft breakdown for the purposes of splitting charges as needed. So if you want to if you have a principal that usually operates one aircraft and another principal that operates the second aircraft, we'll be able to do a breakdown of the emissions per aircraft if that is going to be required. That way, you know where each aircraft in your operation stands. And again, this will come after we've completed the ETS reporting cycle for 2024.
Yeah, the splitting of charges is generally for management company, US based management company operations. They need to rebill out to their individual operators that are flying under their heading. So we do that a lot for them. But like Juan mentioned, there could be other reasons that you might want to have those reports broken out to understand how much activity a specific aircraft did, how much activity specific flights with specific passengers on board, what their CO2 might have been for the year. We can help you break down any of those numbers if your organization or your boss is looking for more depth of information like that. But we want to make sure that everybody gets one of these compliance summaries at the end of the year so that you feel confident that things are closed and you can look forward to what comes next. And what comes next is just I hate to say that ETS is getting more complicated, but dang, it's getting more complicated. If you didn't minor in chemistry or something like that, these days, some of the stuff that they're talking about, I just have to trust. I just have to, trust that they know exactly what they're talking about. So let me break down a couple of things we've been talking about on social and that we'll be talking about going forward is tracking and monitoring of non-CO2 emissions. Excuse me, hold on. Sorry. Tracking non-CO2 emissions. And you're like, we just figured out what tracking CO2 emissions is all about. What do you mean non-CO2 emissions? So it kind of goes in line with sustainable aviation fuel initiatives, but this has been planned out for several years and has just kind of started to take shape and is actually applicable for operators starting in January 1st of 2025. So some of the key points here in 2025, there's going to be a monitoring plan system that starts with procedures for tracking non-CO2 emissions like contrails, nitrogen oxides, and we're going to do that through different flight data and aircraft characteristics. So think in a lot of the ways that we're estimating CO2 now, that's how we'll be estimating non-CO2 gases for most operators that are on here that are small emitters. That's really what we'll be leaning into, more estimator tools, leaning into more verbiage about estimates. So this is not about you specifically tracking, but definitely incorporating new tools in there and new procedures that we'll need to document for you. 2025 and 2026 are what they're calling a phase-in approach, where the implementation of non-CO2 ETS compliance is going to come in gradually. You'll have some voluntary options as an operator to voluntarily report, voluntarily offset during that particular time, with the idea that by 2027, all of those things will be in place and it will be mandatory, required monitoring, reporting, and offset for all, of course, relative to thresholds. The technical challenge is accurately measuring, monitoring non-CO2 emissions. It is definitely not as easy as calculating CO2, and it may require other data sets from us, the operators, that both pair up the actual performance of the aircraft or where it's flying. So we're talking about aircraft type, distance flown, routes flown, all of that stuff. But there's also a weather component, and what the weather is at a different location actually makes these non-CO2 gases, changes the way that they interact with the environment. It makes them better or worse depending on the weather. So there's going to be a feature of how we track that that's going to be, a little challenging to get over, but we're here for it, right? We are here for the challenge. So non-CO2, what is non-CO2 emissions in aviation? What do you need to know? So nitrous oxide, NOx, yeah, what is that? NOx, produced in jet engines. It contributes to ozone formation at high altitudes. It's a short-lived but powerful gas. Also leads to depletion of methane in the atmosphere. Water vapor and contrails. The contrails can evolve into cirrus clouds, which trap heat and contribute to warming. Sulfate aerosols emit sulfur content into aviation, and they can have cooling effects by reflecting sunlight. Black carbon or soot comes from incomplete combustion of an aviation fuel, increases or influences cloud formation and absorbs heat. And then hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide also have climate impact. So why do they matter? They say that these impacts are altitude dependent, meaning their effects differ based on whether flights occur at cruising altitude or closer to ground, and in future regulation, including potential expansions to EU, UK, and Corsia, will be start accounting for non-CO2 emissions in their trading schemes. What does that look like? Looks like an addendum to your monitoring plans. Like we put out as we renewed everybody for monitoring this year, we talked about some new requirements and what's coming. This is what we're talking about. So we're still working with regulatory authorities on kind of a snapshot draft addendum of this ETS monitoring plan, where we've engaged with some other technical SMEs who might be experts in hydrocarbons and non-CO2 gases to help supplement Wananai's knowledge wherever necessary. And then, of course, we're going to be working with operators to get this stuff incorporated into all your plans. But our current plan is summer 2025, and that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, the regulators aren't quite ready with with their suggested verbiage and how they want this to run. The NEATS tool that is coming out is not available as of yet. And so we're still a little bit fluid on this, even though it's mandatory from January 1, 2025. I think summer 2025 is really when these monitoring plan amendments are going to get made. And we will be talking with each operator about any new data that we may need from them, any new documentation that we may need from them when it comes to reporting at the end of the year, and try to tee that up as best we can. But Universal, when it comes to this stuff, Universal is learning a little bit right now with the rest of the industry, because it's coming out. The information that we need is coming out very slowly from these different countries and different member states. Then, of course, we have the 26 different approaches to it, right? Every member state's kind of saying something a little bit different, expecting something a little bit different, and so we need to get locked in for summer. So what's next with non-CO2? ETSF is currently exploring ways to integrate non-CO2 emissions into their system. Right now, they're creating what they call the NEATS tool. So if you've experimented or downloaded the ETS small emitters tool at any point, it's going to be similar. It's going to be looking for characteristics, your flight characteristics, your aircraft type, where you flew to, how far you flew, and some other information to give you an estimate for your non-CO2 emissions. But then there's going to be other operational strategies that work with this non-CO2 to optimize flight altitudes using sustainable aviation fuel and other options to reduce your non-CO2 footprint. Here's kind of a breakdown of those scenarios of what they look like on a high level, but the methodology shows an opportunity for aircraft operators to utilize NEATS to estimate non-CO2 emissions for aircraft operators. It's a new mountain to climb, but we're all going to get there together, and Universal will lead the way. So I know that's a mouthful, Juan. And
it is. Hearing you speak of those contrails and the nitrous oxide, and like, who is this guy? We should get some honorary what is it? Chemistry
You
diplomas
get
or
an
something.
honorary environmental chemist degree. That's right. That's exactly what I need. That's exactly what I need. So I think that's everything I had prepared for today, Kat. So let me throw it back over to you real quick.
Yeah, thank you so much to both of you. That was great. I certainly learned a lot. Um, and we do have a few, I think 3 questions from the chat for y'all. The first one is the EU has a new anti-tankering rule designed to increase SAF use. What happens if you loaded with SAF out of country on departure? Do you have to plan to burn 90% of your fuel load? More importantly, how does this work with ICAO Annex 6 fuel reserve requirements?
Yeah, and what we're talking about there is Refuel EU, and I didn't talk about Refuel EU here because it's applicable to a small amount of operators for us, especially when it comes to ETS reporting. But Tim, let me reach out to you after the call and see if I can't point you in the right direction. Uh, I know the anti-tankering rule and designed as as far as Refuel EU. I think we also have some progressive approach type periods of when they're going to demand this versus what the requirement is starting on January 1st, 2025. But Refuel EU, for those that don't know, is a sustainable aviation fuel mandate that in the EU that points out a couple different ways. It affects aircraft operators. It affects airports and ground handlers and fuelers to like Tim is saying here in his question, push sustainable aviation fuel usage in the region. And to help support that, there's some verbiage in there about not being able to tanker fuel in from other locations, and some exemptions on if that fuel has a sustainable aviation fuel, if that previous uplift was SAF or had SAF involved in it. But anyway, Tim, I will reach out to you offline and see if I can get you to the right resource and answer your question a little bit better.
Thanks, Adam. Another question we have from Kevin, is there a way to tie in Eurocontrol to this table on a weekly basis throughout the year and have this table on each operator's UV Go tab? And also have a table for where the operator stands as far as compliance, like green check boxes when everything is satisfied.
Hey, I'm a business development systems guy. I think it's a great idea. We haven't incorporated the Eurocontrol data. I don't know about being able to incorporate Eurocontrol directly like that, but I think it's a cool idea, and I definitely like the idea of checkboxes or something that could communicate a status more clearly versus just a data location right now. So it's very simple. The UV Go tool for emissions is very simple. It's just a data collection hub at the moment. But good suggestions, Kevin. I like it.
And from Eddie, are these compliance summaries new? I don't recall seeing these reports in the past.
Not new. Yeah, go ahead, Juan.
No, I was gonna say they're not new, but we want to, as a subscriber, we want to give you all a more robust product that you can really, have in hand and say, hey, I'm paying for this service. What am I getting out of it? So we want to be better about giving everyone a compliance summary. We've done it in the past, but not at a wide scale to all of our subscribers, and that's what we're changing up this year. We want to be able to give you all a better product and service.
Yeah, I think and so a lot of times we focused on reporting operators. So if you've been exempt and didn't want something official about your exemption, you might not have gotten one of those. But like Juan said, it's a best practice for us, and it's what we're going to do going forward. So we've been submitting those for years or sending those out for years, but focused most on people who've been through reporting processes or requested a specific summary. So we said that's a great idea, and we're gonna expand it to everyone.
Okay, we have 2 more questions in the chat. I've heard that Part 91 operators are exempted from MRV. non-CO2 emissions monitoring and reporting, is it the same in 2027, not voluntary but mandatory year?
I haven't heard about private operators being exempted from non-CO2. So we could look at that offline, but I have not heard that, aircraft operators, or that they're designating between different types of aircraft operators for non-CO2. It appears to be a new part of the annex and a statement that they've been pushing out. But if you've got something showing that it's exempt, or that you've seen that we missed, please send it, and that way we'll make the correction to our go forward process. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
It would be fantastic if private
Make
operators
life easier.
if private operators are exempt from non-CO2. That'd be great, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Private operators are exempt from refuel EU.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some definite crossover in those things. And so maybe there's some confusion there. But send me what you got, and we'll review it.
Okay, and seems like this is our last question, unless someone has a last minute one to add. If I'm always under the 1,000-ton limit as a private operator and therefore don't have to report, can I expect to be audited at some point, or at least queried for proof?
Yeah, I would say that an audit, as long as you're saying under those 1,000 tons, is not likely, because they push together a list of applicable operators kind of on a yearly basis, the individual member states, and get hyper focused on those people, right? Because that's their mandate, is to make sure that they comply. What we're always doing, though, is making sure that your control has the right information, so that those member states are being informed that you are under, and keeping those fleet lists up to date, and doing a data validation with you if we think it's necessary, if we're lacking information. So that we try to avoid anything like that, or any reports that get over a threshold, and then you start to look at it and realize they've captured the wrong aircraft, or they've mixed up operators, or you sold that aircraft and it's not you doing the flying anymore. There's a variety of different things that we're doing with Eurocontrol, the member states, to keep that question from ever getting to a hassle for you operators if you're under.
And again, since you are a subscriber, each one of you holds a subscription to our emissions portal through UVGo. We encourage you to go in UVGo, select the emissions tab, and see your operations, see your calculations that we've been monitoring. And again, keep in mind that these will only capture the operations where Universal is managing that particular flight, but you have the ability to add any operation that you are wanting to track. You can send us a monthly report so we can upload it, and that gives you a pretty good estimate of where your operation stands as far as emissions numbers. So take advantage of it. Go into that global emissions portal, take a look at it, and see if there's anything that we need to update as far as adding legs, adding aircraft, etc. And we will be more than happy to do it for you.
We also spend a decent amount of time sending exemption notices to member states, and being proactive and getting in front of that before they start asking questions. So we provide validated data sets, for operators who are exempt, and try to clear. We're working together with member states. We both have a mandate to get somewhere by March 31st. So we work really very closely hand in hand, and kind of say, don't worry about these guys. Yes, we're working on these. We're focused and prioritizing these, but we do send out proactive exemption notices to member states as well.
And another question we just got: how can an operator use any carbon offset programs that the airplane owners already subscribe to comply with current regulations?
The problem is, this is the difference between voluntary and mandatory. If your airplane owners are working with somebody to do some sort of voluntary offsets or have access to carbon credits, or even work in a corporate flight department for maybe an oil or gas producer or a heavy manufacturer who has a corporate entity that manages carbon credits. We have to make sure that it's the right carbon credit. So there are only for EU, EUAs, EUAAs, CERs, and ERUs are the only types of credits that you can surrender to meet your mandatory obligations. None of those voluntary carbon credits, no other programs, no other will meet that requirement. You can only purchase these mandatory questions or these mandatory allowances. UK is the same thing, but they're even less. So UKAs and UKAAs. UKA is just a UK allowance. A UKAA is a UK aviation allowance. Same thing for EU. EU allowance, EU aviation allowance. Whatever of those flavors you get purchased, it's still 1 ton for 1 carbon credit. But that's why other sustainability programs that are not ETS reporting will not meet ETS requirements.
And another question, can we check our remaining carbon credits through UVGo?
I'm guessing, I don't know what it means by remaining carbon credits. I'm guessing that that's meaning what carbon credits might be in the registry account still. Maybe there was an offset or they bought and had to offset less. The amount of carbon credit balance that you have will only be available to us in your registry account, in your secure AOHA account, and we definitely will not be able to link those to UVGo. But anytime you want to know anything about those accounts, you can check with us, and we can send you snapshot data or even give you give you some secondary access if you want to go through the steps to be a to be blessed and be able to access this very secure, very secretive portal.
And keep in mind when we do any kind of reporting and offsetting for you, we will only purchase the amount of carbon credits needed to be surrendered. We match it to where if you owe 20 credits, we will only purchase the 20 credits for you to be in compliance with that number that needs to be offset for that year.
Yeah, Universal has never purchased a carbon credit that was not specifically for a compliance need for a flight flown by an operator. We don't hedge, we don't buy in advance, we don't encourage operators at these very low levels to consider hedging or anything like that. It's strictly a data and compliance exercise for us. But each individual report is then supported with a carbon purchase that's just unique for that operator.
Awesome. Thanks for answering those questions, guys. Juan, do you see anything else in the chat that you'd like to
No,
highlight?
I think we covered every question that was in the chat.
Awesome. Well, we covered a lot today, and I hope you found the format useful for everybody. Thank you so much to Adam and Juan for their input today. Remember, our team will be reaching out to guide you through these challenges, and we'll also get the reporting link sent out. Feel free to share it with your colleagues. And remember, you can always reach the GRS admissions team. The email was just posted, but it's eu-ets@univ-wea.com. And Adam and Juan will be attending IOC and SDC if you want to connect in person. And so that's it for us today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Don't hesitate. And thank you so much for joining us and spending your time with us today. Take care. And
Thank you, everyone.
see you later.
Thanks, all.
Thank you. Bye.